After a day that was supposed to be about Labour and them rebranding, it's ended with Starmer freaking out and his Labour Party crashing further. Yes, the Prime Minister addressed the people of the UK as he set out milestones in his plan for change. Those were highest sustained growth in the G7, 1.5 million homes in England and Wales, and fast-track planning decisions in 150 major economic infrastructure projects, named police officer for every neighbourhood, and 13,000 additional officers, PCSOs and volunteer special constables, record 75% proportion of 5-year-olds starting school ready to learn, clean power by 2030 through GB Energy, end hospital backlogs, to meet NHS standards of 92% of patients waiting no longer than 18 weeks for an elective treatment. For those of you who missed his speech, it was just a load of drivel. In today's video, though we will be discussing why Archer this speech, he is freaked out big time. Not only that, but we will also go over all of the latest news from up and down the country. But first, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and join our fast-growing community. Just a quick one to say we have new Make Britain Great, again t-shirts available on our store. Go grab them now. They are available at britishstand.com or check the link in the description. Labour have dropped to third place in a shock new Westminster poll. Keir Starmer's party are currently behind the Conservatives and Reform UK, according to polling company Find Out Now. Just 23% of survey respondents committed to voting for Labour, compared with 24% for Reform UK and 26% for the Conservatives. The Labour vote share in this poll is almost a third lower than their total for July's general election. Pollsters at Find Out Now believe this is for several reasons, including that Labour voters are less likely to say they will vote, or less likely to vote for the party again. Only 84% of 2024 general election Labour voters said in the poll that they would definitely, or very likely, vote if there were a general election called tomorrow, compared to 95% of Conservatives and 90% of Reform UK voters. Meanwhile, just 69% of 2024 general election Labour voters said they'll vote Labour again, compared to 82% of Conservatives and 90% of Reform UK voters. Reform UK has overtaken Labour for the first time, according to a shock new poll. The survey, by pollsters Find Out Now, put Nigel Farage's party in second place behind the Tories, with Labour third. It suggests British politics is now a three-way fight between the Conservatives, Reform UK and Labour, with the parties separated by just 3 points. The Tories are on 26%, 1 point down on Find Out Now's last poll a week ago. Reform UK are up 2 points to 24%, leapfrogging Labour, who have dropped 2 points to 23%. The Lib Dems are way behind on 11%, with the Greens on 9% and the SNP on 3%. The findings are a blow for Keir Starmer, who unveiled Labour's plan for change today as he tries to get the government back on the front foot following 5 months of difficult headlines. Reform UK has overtaken Labour in a national opinion poll for the first time, pushing Keir Starmer's party into third place. Nigel Farage's outfit commands 24% of public support according to Find Out Now, up by 2 points on last week. The poll of 2,607 adults, which was conducted on Wednesday, shows Labour in third place at 23% of the vote, down 2 points on last week, while the Tories lead at 26%. It is the first Westminster voting intention poll to put Reform ahead of Labour, and prompted Zia Yusuf, the party's chairman, to declare it would win the next general election. The findings are currently an outlier, because Labour led Reform by between 7 and 11 points in 3 polls conducted by BMG, JL Partners, and More in Common in recent weeks. Last week, Reform passed 100,000 members and unveiled Dame Andrea Jenkyns, a former Tory minister who lost her seat at the election, as a candidate for a mayoral election in May. Mr. Yusuf said, "Reform has all the momentum in British politics. Reform is now polling at 24%, and for the first time, we are now polling ahead of Labour. We recently surged past 100,000 members, are adding members at a record pace, and we are just getting started. The British people want real change after years of failure and deception. Reform will form the next government of the United Kingdom." Richard Tice, Reform's deputy leader, noted it is the highest score the party has had in any poll since its formation in 2020. Lee Anderson, the party's chief whip, added, "Staggering, Reform overtakes Labour in the polls. The political tsunami continues." The poll had the Liberal Democrats at 11%, the Greens at 9%, and the SNP at 3%. It comes as Keir sought to move on from a series of scandals in his first 5 months with a major speech on Thursday in which he outlined 6 milestones for his government. The Prime Minister's popularity has plummeted since Labour's general election landslide, amid a backlash to his inheritance tax raid on farmers and stripping almost 10 million pensioners of the winter fuel allowance. Louise Hay resigned as Transport Secretary last week after it emerged she was convicted of fraud a decade ago, while there have also been high-profile rows over freebies and cronyism. Support for reform at the general election largely came at the expense of the Conservatives, but it came second to Labour in 98 constituencies, including many red wall seats. Mr Farage recently said he was now more focused on winning over voters who currently support Labour or are not inclined to vote than converting more Tory supporters. Neil Lawson, director of the progressive campaign group Compass, said, "This is just one poll, but Labour slipping into third place behind the Tories and Reform should send alarm bells ringing. The trend is becoming increasingly clear. Without a plan to deliver real and lasting change, and a mandate for it, Labour will fall prey to the incumbency curse we're seeing across the world." Reform returned 5 MPs at the general election and won just over 4 million votes. Mr Farage and Mr Youssef are now focused on May's county council elections. The party says it will have to win more than 100 councillors if it is to pose a credible challenge to Labour. What are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments. In some other news, Clive Bailey, a farmer, accused Labour of declaring civil war on the farming community after MPs voted against a motion aimed at protecting family farms from Sir Keir Starmer's proposed inheritance tax changes. The motion, which was defeated 339 votes to 181, sought to prevent a new 20% inheritance tax on agricultural property and land worth over £1 million, an increase from the current exemption. Bailey, speaking in an interview, argued that Labour's stance would cost them 100 rural seats in the next election. He pointed out that despite showing restraint so far, farmers were growing increasingly frustrated. Labour defended their inheritance tax proposal, arguing it was necessary to address a £22 billion public finance gap. However, Labour MP Marcus Campbell-Savers expressed concern during the debate, causing trouble. In other news, an EasyJet flight from Sharm el-Sheikh to Manchester was forced to make a dramatic emergency landing in Venice after a passenger's life-threatening medical crisis. Had just taken off from the Egyptian resort at 8:05 p.m. local time on Wednesday, bound for Manchester, and expected to land at 12:10 a.m. Thursday. However, as the flight soared above the Mediterranean, a sudden medical emergency on board sent shockwaves through the cabin. With the situation becoming critical, the aircraft was immediately diverted to Venice, a decision that spared no time or hesitation. There, emergency medical teams rushed to assist, and the affected passenger was swiftly transferred to a nearby hospital for urgent care. Meanwhile, the remaining passengers anxiously waited as the flight's course was dramatically altered. After the medical emergency was handled in Venice, the flight finally resumed its journey to Manchester. An EasyJet spokesperson confirmed the emergency, stating that the diversion was made to ensure the passenger received the vital medical attention they needed. "We wish them a swift and full recovery, and we are in contact with their family to support their well-being," the spokesperson added, emphasizing the airline's commitment to the safety and care of its passengers and crew. Despite the unexpected detour, EasyJet expressed deep appreciation for the other passengers, acknowledging their patience and understanding throughout the tense, unplanned stop. The airline reiterated that the safety of all aboard remains its highest priority. Lastly, Just Stop Oil, JSO, has announced plans for a major wave of protests this spring, vowing to blockade Parliament for weeks with thousands and thousands of activists. The eco group is determined to pressure the government to end fossil fuel extraction by 2030. The planned protests aim to paralyse Westminster with week-after-week blockades, potentially causing major disruptions in the capital. JSO intends to overwhelm the legal system with mass arrests, straining police stations and courts like never before. Critics have condemned these tactics as extreme, warning they could endanger citizens and MPs. A recent YouGov poll shows the public is firmly against such disruptions, with nearly 75% of Britons believing the jail sentences of previous JSO protesters were either appropriate or too lenient. Even among those who support stronger climate action, 58% back strict penalties for unlawful protest. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick called the planned protests militant, emphasising that the government must ensure swift justice for lawbreakers. Tory MP Richard Holden pointed to existing police powers to combat such protests, which he said undermine democracy, disrupt daily life, and cost the economy millions. The group unveiled its plans at a 6-hour event in Birmingham, where activists read poems from jailed colleagues and shared stories of resilience. JSO insiders also hinted at targeting major cultural and sporting events, with Wimbledon 2025 possibly in their sights. Despite the controversy, a JSO spokesman defended the protests, claiming, "Non-violence is at our core. We won't endanger MPs, but we must reclaim Parliament from the moneyed interests." What are your thoughts on what we discussed in today's video? Let me know down in the comments section below. If you've not yet already, make sure you do drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more British political content. Thank you, take care, goodbye.